Casual Magic has been brought to you by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can get cool stuff. Use the code CASUAL for 5% off your order. We're also sponsored by Quiver Time, makers of the Quiver and Bolt deck cases and other fine card holding accessories. Use the code CASUAL on their site for 10% off your purchase. And by Architect, a deck hosting website that doesn't sell anything, but they like me and I like them, so kindly use them for all your deck list needs. Now, on to the show. Hello and welcome to Casual Magic, the show where we talk about the fun side of Magic the Gathering. My name is Stephen Button. Casual Magic is brought to you by Cool Stuff Inc., Architect, and Quiver. Today, I have a very special guest, Phil Gallagher, aka THRABEN. He does a lot of content for Eternal formats, namely Legacy and stuff. I got to meet him in Minneapolis, and it was really interesting, and I've been following ever since, and I think that you do a lot of cool and fascinating stuff, so I thought it would be really interesting, especially now that like Eternal formats have been getting really shaken up, what with the advent of Lord of the Rings and Friends. I thought it would be a neat time to sit and touch base and talk about Legacy and I don't know, Commander. Enough things I talk about. Hi Phil, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, it's wonderful to be here. Like I love having the opportunity to just like gush and talk about magic with other people who are
Of course,
passionate. It's
the
one of my
Eternal
favorite
player wants to
things.
gush.
You caught me.
God, dude. Yeah, but exactly. It's always fun. I think one of the things that we content creators don't really have a lot of is spaces to just talk about magic in general, or just the things we enjoy about it without being locked into the content that we're specifically doing. Like, I know I've got some other friends who are like commander focused who really really want to like do an episode about drafting or whatever and just can't because their audience is like, I'm sorry man, we're here for commander. And yeah, so I was like, you know what if I just gave people a place to come and talk about the things they enjoy about this game beyond the stuff that they are obligated to do.
Yeah, sometimes the passion says one thing and the analytics say another thing, and
Boy
that's
howdy.
that's something you have to grapple with as you start growing as a content creator.
Oh, it is the worst feeling in the world when you're like, this is the episode I've desperately wanted to do. I'm super excited. It's my passion project. What do you mean it's 10 out of 10 YouTube? Oh man. So I guess we should start a smidge. Like, first off, I met you because my dear friend Jeremy, Missouri MTG, who is like, everybody's favorite dealer and I guess secret drop guy on Twitter with his random packets that just give us joy. And yeah, we met up because it was like randomly, he was like, hey, I'm playing Commander in this hotel. Come here. And I'm like, okay. And so I did, and we got to hang out and play Commander together with Chase and him and you, and I don't know who else was there. Someone else I don't remember. Anyway, it's not important. But yeah, it was really cool to meet you. And like, I think these Magic Cons have gotten a lot better about helping us meet with people outside of our specific bands, you know? And I don't know, I thought it was really cool. Um, and so I started following you from there. And one of the secrets I share with people is that I love eternal formats like legacy, vintage, and modern, but I don't play them very often because I'm an elf player and elves are perennially like tier 2.5 or something. So it's just like
Ever since that darned plague engineer got
oh my
printed,
god.
it has been tough to play decks focused around a single creature type.
Let me tell
Rip
you.
Infect in particular.
Let me tell you how annoyed I was when Plague Engineer was revealed and then Fury came out. And I'm like, what? Your friggin' Pyroclasm wasn't enough, but you now have to give him a free Pyroclasm that'll just kill all my things? Um, yeah, I haven't gotten over it. I hate wizards. I write them angry letters all the time. I hate Plague Engineers so much. Like, why would you go out of your way, like they're like, oh, we're going to be helping lesser known archetypes and we're going to be using these sets to buff up things, and then we build the one card that just obliterates every mono creature type deck there is, like just wipes the table. And why would you do that? Like, what, you think merfolks and elves were that strong that they needed to just be utterly like eliminated from the pool?
It's kind of crazy how much the supplemental sets have changed Eternal formats. Like it was always true for a long time that the supplemental sets were places for weird things to slip through, Scavenging Ooze, True Name Nemesis. But from
Yes.
about Modern Horizons 1 and onward, every time we've gotten a supplemental set, they have just absolutely changed Eternal formats, sometimes requiring bans.
It's wild to me that Eternal went from like, here's a place where you can play whatever deck you want, or like your favorite standard deck can graduate to modern, et cetera, or they turned it into now a rotating format. Like a format where every time a new Universes Beyond or a new Horizon set comes out, suddenly everything is broken and like, oh no, what do we do? All of our decks don't work anymore. Like it's funny because when Lord of the Rings was announced, I was like, "Look, they're making this set to introduce the new players. They're making this set to bring in new fans, folks who are Lord of the Rings fans who might have explored Magic and didn't. They're going to make a set that's very easy to get into, very easy to play, and it's super fun." And they did that. And I was like, "They're not going to upend Modern or Legacy or whatever with this. It's going to be fine. They're not using this to flip the boat." And then, of course, what happens? Lord of the Rings, friggin' the One Ring, and then Orcish Bowmasters and like lesser and lesser award to things like the cycling guys and also Mirkwood bats because that's going to be like a subtle problem later on. But I was just like, why would you? I like 99% of the set is totally fine and lovely, and then suddenly just like, oh hey, what if every time you draw a card, I get infinite value off of that card?
So I will say one of the things that I like about the Lord of the Rings set is that most of the power is contained in 3 or 4 cards as
Mm.
opposed to Modern Horizons 2, where it's just like that elemental cycle and then there's
Oh
a whole
god.
bunch of other things too. So like for the purposes of legacy in particular, it's Orcish
Mm.
Bowmasters, the One Ring, and Fourth Airlingas, with the Troll of Khazard-dûn, I think it is.
That's the guy, the 6'5", right?
Yeah, the land cycler, being maybe number 4 behind them.
Why that one?
Uh, so you cast Dark Ritual, you swamp cycle, and then you reanimate it on turn 1.
Oh. And then they're like, "You need 3 things to block or you're taking," and that's a 3-turn clock, GG's.
Yep. It's,
Ouch.
really strong, and guess what?
Ouch.
6 mana is totally reasonable for, like, Dark Ritual and Ancient Tomb decks to just hard cast it too. That card's been very good.
Yeah, because I was watching the Pro Tour and it was wild to me. Like I looked at those, I'm like, oh, these are great for limited. Like they're lovely, smooth out cycles. These are cards that in a million years I never would have thought would have cracked an eternal format. And suddenly everybody's like, are you high? They let you get the specific land you need for 1 mana and then dump something gigantic into the yard where it can be brought back. Like that the fact that the Rakdos scam deck is like, what if we take Grief and Fury, throw them away turn 1, and then bring them back immediately? And I was like, oh my god. Because I forgot how Evoke works specifically, that it isn't just like play and go to the graveyard. It's go into play long enough for you to respond to be able to put the thing that says when this goes to the graveyard, bring it back. Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
Are you
those cards have changed Legacy. So in Legacy right now, a lot of the black decks are playing both Grief and the Troll
mm,
alongside Reanimate. So we kind of do the same thing that the modern players are playing, just with less
just with better
situational
cards?
timing.
It's crazy, but you're right. Modern Horizons 2 is, I mean, Modern Horizons 1 and 2, well, 1 was like fine. It had, I mean, it had like Ren and 6 or whatever and Hogak. So maybe it wasn't fine, but it wasn't like as quite as like ground shaking as Modern Horizons 2 was. Like obviously, I mean, the Solitude and Friends are big deal, but like Esper Sentinel or you know, I mean, frankly, I could just stop at Esper Sentinel. Dress Down, like random garbage card that you wouldn't think does anything. Like when you read Dress Down, and it's like when it comes to, it's a flash 2 mana enchantment, comes into the battlefield, draw a card, and creatures lose all abilities. And you're like, that can't possibly be good. Who cares? Well, it turns out when, I don't know, like freaking Tarmogoyf loses all abilities, that becomes a 0/1. right? Or like,
Let's give a better example than that. How about countering a Thassa's Oracle
oh
trigger
god.
essentially by flashing that in? How about using it at your opponent's end step so that you can cast a Phyrexian Dreadnought on your turn without sacrificing it?
Oh my god. Oh my
Legacy's
god.
great, folks. You get to take all of these cards that have strange situational abilities and build the perfect little home for them so that they can do their thing.
That's part of why I love watching legacy decks. I love the fact that, like, they take every random card that like, when somebody comes up with a random card that you were like, "This is garbage trash that nobody would ever play," and they're like, "Yeah, but if I pair it with this one card from, like, Legend, suddenly it's an unbeatable combo," and you're like, how did you do that? Where did you even think about that?" Um, that's, like, my favorite thing about Magic is when people are just like that's why I mean, that's why I play Commander, right? Like, I want to see people take these cards that have no business being next to each other and suddenly just being like, "Whoops, that's infinite everything."
Yeah,
Uh,
that's something I've enjoyed a lot about CEDH as
mm,
well, where all of a sudden some like firebrand archer or something like that, that like you would play in limited and that's about it, finds a home in an Ob Nixilis deck and all of a sudden it looks really, really hot. Like that context can just make cards very strong.
Firebrand Archer?
Yeah,
Oh,
isn't
when
that
you
one of the
cast
ones you cast
y
a spell, it pings an opponent?
oh, yeah, because the new Ob Nixilis is, like, when you do a damage oh, no, that's, there's that also I mean, I guess it would go well with the Gark Starn or whatever from Warhammer, which is when you do 1 damage, it does 2 extra damage. Uh, but yeah, Ob Nixilis, the new Ob Nixilis cares about pinging too, right? Like,
Yeah,
if they
Captive
lose 1
Kingpin.
life yeah, they, like, lose 1 specific life and then something happens. Let me look it up because that was one of the stupid cards from, the other alternate set that just came out, March Machines Aftermath. Yeah, a Captive Kingpin for 2 black green, 2 black red, 4/3. Flying trample because why not? Whenever one or more opponents each loses exactly 1 life, you put a 1/1 counter on it, exile the top card of your library, and then you can play it until your next end step. Wow, that's a lot. So you could play a non-creature spell, like let's say you got shot, and then do an extra point of damage, draw a card, put a counter on it. I feel like the designers have said, you know what? What if I just didn't worry about balance and just said, look, it's not going to standard. I can just do whatever I want. Um,
Oddly, I feel like as a whole, the balance in supplemental products has been good given how many of them happen. It's just
yes.
every once in a while we have to get out the fire hose and be like, ah, back, ah, no, no.
God, Orcish Bowmasters though, like everybody look like when I can look at a card and say this is broken in half, that's when you know they've gone too far.
I'm gonna pull up a number for you just so you can understand how absurd it is within the context of Legacy right now.
And I want to talk
So,
about fourth year Lingas too when you get the chance
oh
because I'm
yeah,
curious about that.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So, MTG Goldfish has this feature where you can look at format staples.
Mm.
In Legacy, the format where basically everything is legal, Orcish Bowmasters is currently in 45% of decks at an average number of played of 3.5. So nearly half of all Legacy decks right now that are putting up results are playing Orcish Bowmasters.
What the hell?
So our format changed literally overnight. Like you could feel the difference between when Orcish Bowmasters was and wasn't available, and the format upended. It's
What?
been crazy.
That's so I mean, look, Legacy is this format just like Vintage where you're drawing a brick ton of cards all the time. So obviously a card that punishes draw is going to be huge there. Um, Similarly, it kills a lot of one mana utility creatures. It gives you a random body for everything you need. I mean, look, in all respects, Bowmasters is like the perfect magic card, right? Like it does everything you want short of drawing you cards. And I think that if it did, that would be heinous. That would be like instant auto ban. But that card is Nutter Butters, right? Like it's I get it. They need to sell cards to eternal players. Eternal players are the vast majority of players these days. And so we're going to get things like this. We're going to get cards that come out and, invalidate your old EDH decks, which is a thing I just hate. Like, I think the premise of the format is that you can play your favorite cards all the time forever. And, like, obviously, I don't mean that every card is going to be good or going to be viable. Obviously, my Hamodi Jins are like, I can play it. It's not going to be groundbreaking or good or really worth playing. But it's not just gonna lose me the game. But then after in the past like 3, 4 years, it feels like if you are not updating your decks to the meta, you are going to die. And that's weird
So
for a casual format.
for many years, Legacy was pitched as a format where you buy a deck for life. You might spend a few $1,000s, but you never have to worry about standard rotations.
Mhm.
And for a long time, only one or two legacy playable cards came out in every set. And we
Yeah,
got excited when a fringe deck got an upgrade.
right.
And that's just not true anymore. So, what I tell people now is Legacy is a format where you can play any sort of deck you want as long as the thing you're doing is powerful.
Mm.
So, while you might not be able to play your like ornithopter theme deck, you can probably find a very strong creature type and build a deck around it, and even probably build it in a way where it's not just going to eat it to one Supreme Verdict or one Plague Engineer or whatever. But you can't
Plague Engineer.
necessarily be married to the original thing that you got into the format with.
Yeah. That said though, you could make a cool Thopters like a Thopter sword deck. I think that still works in Legacy, doesn't it?
It very rarely sees play, but it does happen. It's actually much more common that people play Ornithopter to Ninjutsu in a Yuriko, and then later on they sacrifice the Ornithopters to Retrofitter Foundries to turn them into 4/4s.
Fair. Retrofitter Foundry is a card that, like, when it came out in the Commander like Precon or whatever, I looked at that and I was like, "This seems cute. It's fine. It's not going to be all that great." And for a long time, it didn't. And then suddenly, people are like putting it in cubes and putting it in like legacy decks and stuff. It's like, oh, this is actually real stupid. One-on-one format
Once
versus
we
like in a
got
multiplayer.
Urza's Saga, and
Oh
that
yeah,
was just like this beautiful tutor target that you could keep making tokens with to make your original constructs larger and larger, that card became a legacy staple.
isn't that what? Like, okay, that's a good pivot. I want to ask you because Commander decks the commander precons have basically since the beginning included random cards that end up just being legacy staples. Obviously, we got Flusterstorm, we got True Name Nemesis, uh, Retrofitter Foundry,
Scavenging Ooze,
Scavenging Ooze.
Council's
Well,
Judgment.
Scavenging Ooze is like an everybody's staple though. Like that was like in every format you can staple. Council Judgment was in Conspiracy though.
Oh, that's
Um,
true.
but yeah, so like it was fine when it's like 1 or 2 card. What do you guys think about, like, the fact that now we're getting, like, Commander Masters and Commander Legends and Commander all these and that are just, like, dumping a ton of cards that become legacy playables? Is that, like, weird, or is that just, like it feel like what is the kind of opinion there? Like, are you guys worried that there's too many things coming in at once?
I'm actually not. I've recorded a podcast episode of my podcast, the Eternal Glory podcast, on this specific topic, talking
Mm,
about how supplementary products have changed legacy. And our ultimate conclusion was that they made legacy better
hmm,
because they gave us better answers. They gave us removal and counter spells that were just too strong to go through standard,
hmm,
and that let us answer problems. So, for example, when True Name Nemesis first got printed, it was really hard for certain colors to ever remove that card,
sure.
and it ran away with games. And then
True
we
Name
got
Nemesis
Council's
says,
Judgment
protection
as
from
an
target
answer to it.
player. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I just like for the audio listeners, if you don't know what true name is. But yes, I'm sorry. What did you just say?
Yeah, and then shortly after that, we got Council's Judgment, which allowed us
Mm,
to vote for a permanent to exile, which seems like the perfect answer to an existing problem.
that's
Storm
fair.
decks were maybe not problematic, but they were tough to fight against. And then we got Flusterstorm, which is just one of the ultimate counter spells of
Hmm.
all time.
Yeah.
And I think it was from Modern Horizons. We got things like Ice Fang Coatl that gave us a different, flexible sort of Baleful Strix to help out green based control decks.
Ice Fang is such a cool card. Like, I love this card. The flash flying 1/1. You're right. It is exactly Baleful Strix. It's a flash flying 1/1 that draws you a card and has death touch as long as you got snow. So basically, it's Baleful Strix with flash
Yeah,
because if you're
unfortunately,
building,
you
you're gonna have
can't
all
play
snow
that
lands.
card in Legacy anymore because it just dies to Orcish Bowmasters. Weird.
Weird, boy. Baleful Strix is like for a card that came out in a plane chase pre-con. It sure became an instant staple in like Legacy Vintage and Cube. Like that card is there's a lot of people I know who consider Baleful Strix to be their favorite card just because it is so pure. It is so this is what black and blue does. It draws you a card, it gives you a body, and it has death touch. Like, what do you want in life? This is everything. Um, but
My
yeah, you put it in play and Bowmaster bows it.
Yeah, my favorite Magic card is Vampire Nighthawk. That is just
Yes.
the epitome of a Magic card to me. That's the first card that I ever purchased. Like I upgraded my pre-con my like dark steel starter deck that I bought online with 4 copies of Vampire Nighthawk, and I was like, how do I ever lose? This card's insane.
I love Vampire Nighthawk because, like, when I got back into Magic, it was through Duels of the Planeswalkers, and Vampire Nighthawk was like one of the strongest cards in that entire game because it's flying Death Touch Lifelink. It's perfect keywords. It is, in my opinion, the perfect. It's like every time someone's like, "What do you think the perfect Magic card is?" and I'm like, "Vampire Nighthawk, man," because it's like it flies, it's strong, it's got Death Touch and Lifelink, it does everything you want. Like in my house, we would just call it like Flying Death Out Lifelink because we never remember what his name was. And even my wife just loves that card because it's like it gains you life and it kills the thing. Perfect. Let's go. Um, I guess I should ask you that. When did you get into Magic?
So I started at the tail end, or yeah, I started when I was a senior in college.
Hmm.
So that was my first pre-release would have been uh oh gosh, what's the Return to Mirrodin set?
Besieged? No, Mirrodin.
No,
Scar to
before
Mirrodin.
Besieged. Yeah, Scars of
Scars.
Mirrodin. And I learned to play Magic. My kid neighbor and I used to play Yu-Gi-Oh! And like I gave him all of my old Pokemon cards and my Yu-Gi-Oh cards and stuff. And then I came home one summer and he taught me Magic. And in passing, I mentioned to one of my 3 roommates when I got back to college my senior year that I learned to play Magic over the summer. And he was like, "Oh man, I used to play in Boy Scout camp." And so he brought all his old decks in and we just like played for hours. A buddy of mine worked at a card shop, and kind of the rest is history from there.
Mm. And then you gave him all your money
Sure
forever.
did. Sure did.
How do you get into Legacy then? Because a lot of people who get into Legacy started that way. They're just like, I've got these cards. I'm going to use these cards.
So I have always been sort of an obsessive person. If I get into something, I don't do it just a little bit. I maybe do it
Same.
too much.
Mhm.
And so I started watching like SCG coverage of tournaments, and I
Yes.
just fell in love with Legacy. And I was not a wealthy man. I was poor. Like I was a grad student living outside of DC shortly after that. Rent was really expensive.
Mhm.
So for a long time I went to tournaments. I didn't play, I just traded. And I spent 2 years grinding trade binders and built
Wow.
up a very impressive legacy collection. Starting with Death and Taxes, which is a mono white creature control deck with things like Thalia, Guardian of Thraben,
Mhm.
and moved on from there. And from there, like tournament winnings, working as a judge, built up a sizable legacy collection. So
That is that is the dream to be able to go trade binder your way into, like, Legacy because like, that you have to be really finicky and you have to pay really good attention and know what's worth and what people want and how to, like, trade 35 cards into a dual land, It's like, uh, that's tough, man. I I applaud that. Um, because like, I also fell into Legacy through, watching SCGs because like, I would just put them on when I'm mowing the lawn or whatever, and I'd be listening to it, And I would come there for the modern tournament or the whatever the first tournament, the standard one, and then stick around for the legacy. And I would listen to them talk about things like Feline Longmore's amazing, high tide deck, which just blew my mind because I remembered High Tide from when I was a kid, and I was like, that card is not very good. What do you mean a High Tide deck? It's like, oh, this is the coolest deck I've ever seen in my life. What? High Tide is still, I think, my favorite legacy deck. Like High Tide and Legacy Elves, because I just love playing Glimpse of Nature. But yeah, like I loved watching Legacy, but the problem, I mean, watching and listening and stuff, but there was that phase where every goddamn deck was just some flavor of Delver. It was like, "Oh, I'm playing Rug Delver. Oh yeah, well, what's your opponent playing? Bug Delver." Oh, it's just Delvers all the way down, and I'm like, I hate Delver. I hate Delver so much because it's such a boring card.
So Delver is the deck that never dies in Legacy. Delver is this tempo deck that just gets to absorb the latest design mistakes and take advantage of them until they get banned. So Orcish Bowmasters is currently one of the best cards in Legacy. So obviously the Grixis deck, Grixis Delver is the flavor of choice right now.
Stupid Delver. Like I remember when that card came out in Innistrad, and I was playing. I was looking at it like I was still early into my like real dive into Magic, and I'm like, this card seems okay. In limited, it's like a 1/1, maybe once in a while it's a 3/2. Ooh, 3/2. How good could that be? Turns out, turns out, card is an eternal forever staple of like every format it can be in, except for standard. Did you know? You know what's weird? I was thinking the other day that right now we're living in a world where Liliana of the Veil and Delver of Secrets are both legal in standard, and literally nobody is playing them.
That pains me. Like Liliana of the Veil is one of my favorite Magic cards. It like that Innistrad time was like when I
Hmm.
was really getting into Magic, starting to become competitive, played many formats, and
Hmm.
like Liliana of the Veil is just like a good Magic card in my head. And every time I'm deck building, I'm like, yeah, I should probably just cut these Lilianas, and it
It's
kills
isn't
me.
that wild to think about that there was a like literally the deck that won this weekend, the Pro Tour Rakdos Scam, is basically greenless Jund, right? It's old school Jund. It's like just discard all your stuff and lightning bolts, except instead of playing Lilianas and lightning bolts, it's playing Fury and Grief, which is just like better Lilianas and lightning bolts. And I'm like, what? What a world are we living in where Liliana's just not good enough? One of the best planeswalkers of all time is just like medium at best. You're playing it because you got an altered set 10 years ago and it just sitting there. Um
One of my other
uh,
favorite examples of this is Siege Rhino, where Siege
mm,
Rhino was just this like standard dominating thing, did some work in modern for a while. You would blink it with Restoration Angel, you played it
yes.
with Thrag Tusk, and now I like try to think of the last time I've seen any of those cards in play.
I put Siege Rhino into my what the hell is that called? I've got a an Abzan mutate deck that I get it's going to bother me if I don't get the commander correctly. Um it's one of those stupid I'm going to cut this smidge out right here. Yeah, I was like, you know what? I love Siege Rhino, and I've got that random promo that they put out for some reason. So I stuck it into my Nethroi deck, my Nethroi Mutate deck, because it's like half Mutate, half Reanimator. Siege Rhino is perfect. It's a 4/5. It nugs the table and gains you life. You bring it back from the graveyard, it does it again, and you can mutate on top of it. So it's like, it's fine. Everybody's like, couldn't you cut that for a better card? I'm like, yeah, but I want to play Siege Rhino because I remember those days. It's not the best card in the world, but it's cute and makes me happy. So why not? Um, God, Siege Rhino. It's like, yeah, just there's I mean, look, Magic moves on. There's always going to be new cards, and there's always going to be new hotness, and that's just like the game shouldn't stagnate. Obviously not. But when you're playing in formats where you want to just sit there and play your favorite deck forever, it kind of does suck that like a new card comes out that invalidates your entire strategy, right? Like that. The One Ring is a little egregious. I think giving that stupid thing like indestructible, like fine, indestructible, I get it. Protection from everything. Okay, fine, it's only a turn. But that burden counter nonsense, like let me just draw like 6 cards and then pitch this and do it again. It's like, oh,
I play that card in Legacy, Vintage, EDH, CEDH, and if I played more formats, I would play it there too. The fact that it's also just colorless, so you can power it out with like ancient tombs and
Yeah.
workshops and stuff is very silly.
So, how did you get into then doing Thraben U and like doing like legacy content? Like, where did you make that leap?
So I'm a teacher by trade, and I spent a lot of time on forums back in the day before we had Discord servers.
I
And
miss forums, man.
I found
Like,
that I kept answering the same questions again and again and again. So finally I was like, I'm just going to make a website and I'm just going to post the answers to these questions and I'm just going to start making resources. And my content originally started out as death and taxes specific content, and over time, I kind of shifted, and now I'm sort of making videos with every single deck that Legacy has to offer, many of which are nowhere near competitive and no one in their right mind should play. But the people love it, and it's very fun.
well, I mean, that's the thing. Like, it's fine to play the meta deck if you want to win and you want to play in the tournament and do the thing. Great. But the format outside of the tournament sphere should not just be the meta deck. Like we should be allowed to play doofy random decks that just do fun things. Like that's the fun of Magic, right? I don't know. Some people just get really caught up in the winning mindset and that's fine. That's good. Whatever makes you happy. But I also like playing Ravnica block constructed decks, or like decks that are like very thematically like here's like I don't know my Mercadian theme deck or something, right? Like, just give me some neat hook or some neat combo that's just not good enough for a tournament to do, and I'm all over it. Like I just miss like there's like cool cards and cool decks that came out. Like one of my favorite decks of all time made infinite Thopters from a Kaladesh based combo deck that used like panharmonicons and those random things to make energy tokens, and you would use a Thopter Virtuoso
Yep.
to make like infinite Thopters and stuff. I'm like, this deck is trash basically everywhere, but I just want to make it again because I love just the making Tinker Toys, and once in a while it wins and it's happy. I just throw it into modern and it's fine. And everybody's like, "What? You're not playing grief?" I'm like, "No, bro. I cause grief. I don't play grief." Um,
For a long time, I thought that Magic content was supposed to be this like elite strategic content that taught you all the niche knowledge you needed to know. And over time, I realized that the average Magic player is much more interested in, haha, that card goes burr.
yes.
And it took me way longer to realize that than I care to admit.
I mean, that's the thing. It's like a lot of the time. I mean, look, people like I talk to a lot of content creators, and I talk to like a lot of us on behind the stage when we're talking about our views and whatever. And one thing is like there's this struggle I know with like CDH creators who are like, um, when I play decks that all have Thoracle and whatever wins, people get mad that we're only playing Thoracle all the time. And when we play any other deck, people are like, why aren't you playing the meta deck and doing the thing? It's like, okay, well, how do you want it? Do you want to have all Thoracle all the time because that's the best deck in the format? Or do you want us to diversify and give you other things to look at? And that is our eternal struggle. That's like, well, I don't know. I mean, I guess you got to split the difference sometimes, but there's only so many times you can play a Grixis Delver Mirror match before you're just bored, right? Like we have to be entertained too. Um,
Yeah. For a long time, I was one of the best Death and Taxes player, and I was producing consistent Death and Taxes content, and I got no views. Like the handful of people who were really interested in my work, like loved it, adored it. I like last week, I still had someone, 10 years later after I started that content say, like, hey Phil, like when you first put up that website, like it was a game changer for me. Like there's still people who loved that content that I made. But when I started diversifying my content, like my growth picked up incredibly quickly,
well,
where I
yeah,
was just stagnant for so long because I was just appealing to this just tiny, tiny, tiny portion of the true Magic audience.
yeah, it's a challenge. I mean, because like we don't want to abandon our roots, and we don't want to like you know, because a lot of content creators will be like, "Look, I want to make content for this niche because nobody else is doing it," and that's rad. But then you're like, "Hey, I want to grow," so now you got to like make some tough decisions. And it's like, "Look, dude, I'll make these videos once in a while just to remind us where we came from, but they're not the bread and butter here. Like, they're not the thing that's actually pushing the content." But that's why I make my show, like my content is all interview based, because I cannot make any kind of like judgment call based on that, because every guest is different and people are going to listen to whoever they find interesting. So I can't like it's not like I can sit there and say like, okay, well, I'm going to have Marshall Sutcliffe on every week from now on forever because he's the most listened to show. It's like that doesn't work. Although Sheepman Wheeler Love Magic exists because I had Wheeler on a bunch and people really liked it, and we're like, what if we just spun it off into another show? Anyways, that's my plug for my show on my show. I can do that. So let's talk to me about Legacy. Where are we on Legacy right now? What's it going on?
Legacy is in this really interesting period right now where people are completely changing everything that they know about the format. Like you just have to throw away out all of your knowledge because the land cycling commons, yes, the land cycling commons are changing how people are building mana bases.
That's
It's
so
a
wild.
cantrip early on, a threat later on. Like you have a cantrip, air quotes, that can get you an island, not just a basic island, but like a tundra or an underground sea, and later on its ancestral recall. And these things pitch to elementals like grief. They can be put under chrome mocks. So people are relearning how to build mana bases. People are changing their threat bases and trying to move away from X1 creatures due to Orcish Bowmasters.
Mm,
Play patterns of how you cantrip, like the timing of like format staples like brainstorm is scary. It used to be that you would play a land, you'd play a fetch land, you'd cast brainstorm, and then you'd fetch to shuffle.
yep.
Do you still do that if your opponent has black available? Because
Hell
it's
no, you don't.
horrifying. It's horrifying to cast a brainstorm into 2 black mana in this format. So now a lot
That's
of times
amazing, though. I love that. Look, I realize we spent like the first 40 minutes or so being old men talking about, like, gosh, I wish Magic was the same as it used to be and all these new cards. But at the same time, there is something delightful about shaking up a format with like forcing people. Like, Brainstorm is like the central pillar of Legacy. It is like the unmovable like core, the way the Soul Ring is for like EDH, right? Like, people are like, why don't you ban Soul Ring? It's broken. Yeah, well, everybody wants to play Soul Ring. When we don't, that's a different format. But like the same way with like Brainstorm, nobody's gonna touch Brainstorm in Legacy. Are you kidding? But if you make people a little bit more gun shy or a little bit more like break them out of their standard pathways, that gives them something new and interesting to try to work around. And that I think is worthwhile. I think as much as I hate it sometimes when like a grief comes by or a fury comes by and like says you don't get to play elves anymore. At the same time, I love it when a bowmaster is like, "Hey, your cards still work, but now you got to really think about how you want to do it." Because if you're playing Legacy or Eternal formats in general, you're the type of person who really wants to sit and think about your cards. You're playing these formats because you really want to be like, this game is only going to be 4 turns long, but each of those turns is going to be 45 minutes long, right? Like I want to sit there and I want to figure out this stack very carefully and plot out my whole plan. And Bowmaster's coming down and being like, how badly do you want it? Is real interesting.
and it's really cool because it's not like Bowmasters is the only flash creature in the format.
Mm.
So let's say your opponent has 3 black mana available. That could represent both Orcish Bowmasters and Opposition Agent.
Oh god, Oppo, I forgot
Your
that's
move,
legal.
blue player. What would
Oh
you like to
gosh.
do on your turn? The format is incredibly intricate right now. Time will tell whether or not this is healthy or unhealthy, but at least for now, it's incredibly interesting and deck building is changing a lot. Another big change is that control decks now have access to fourth air lingas, which is red, white, X, make
Yeah,
X
the
2
traditional
2
colors of a control deck, red and
haste,
white.
trample tokens. And if a creature you control deals combat damage to an opponent this turn, you also become the monarch. So
Mm.
control decks normally take a long time to win the game. And now it's just like tap 8 mana, make 6/2/2s, attack you for 12, draw a card, I'm the monarch, you're dead next turn. And you're just like, what?
And it's wild though, because you look at Fourth Aerlingus and it's like, this is the most Boros card ever made. It's a good just token spam. It wins you a game. It's great. Super cool card. If you had told me this is going to be like in a legacy control deck, control, I would have been like, you are high. Like there's nothing. I mean, but then control decks need finishers, right? Like we need to have your Pearl Lake Ancients or whatever the hell, some big dumb thing that's gonna be able to hit someone and win. And having a grip of guys show up with haste is exactly what you need.
Back in
God,
my day, we had to use our sensei's divining top to set up Entreat the Angels, and we liked it.
we did not like it. We did it. We did not like it. Oh my god, I hated. I love watching Miracles decks, but what a drag to play against. Um, God, Fourth Aerlingus, it's like it's such a weird card because like that's not the card I would have thought would have popped. But I don't know. It's good to have like it's good to shake things up. That card is cool though. I love that card.
It also
Um,
goes in the Ancient Tomb decks because they have bonus mana and it imprints under Chrome Mox for 2 different colors.
yeah, that's hot. That's
It
hot.
is.
Okay, so here's a very specific legacy question. City of Traders. City of Traders is the land that taps for 2 mana, but if you play another land, it goes away, right?
Yep.
So that land is very popular in like Legacy and Vintage. I cannot. Can you explain to me why? Like why that card? Like because I get it. Is it because to me, I look at that. I'm like that means I can't play any other lands. Is getting the 2 mana that much of a boost over playing other lands?
So there's a couple of things here. Number one, a lot of times you don't need to play another land after that.
Hmm.
Legacy is a format with Lotus Petals and Chrome Mox and Spirit Guides. So a lot of times, what you'll do is you'll play a Chrome Mox on turn one, you will play a City of Traders, you'll play a 3 drop, and your curve stops at 3. So you just don't need another land ever. Or if you do, you're playing something very, very strong that is likely to win the game on its own. Caves of Chaos Adventurers, for example, which is one of the initiative creatures, is one of the few things that you might be willing to sacrifice your land drop for. In
Hmm.
other cases, playing out a lock piece like a Chalice of the Void or a Trinosphere on turn one will sometimes just end games. So if you lock your opponent out of the game and they have close to 0% chance to win, it doesn't matter if you lose that land drop. A lot of
That's
times
good.
when you lose the land drop, you float 2 mana and then you cast a threat afterwards, and it's just okay that you lose it.
Hmm. That's an interesting. Yeah, I guess that makes sense because like you're 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 looking for a much shorter game than like because in like EDH for instance, playing a land like that, yeah, it's a brief acceleration, but then you're kind of stuck. But it depends, I guess, on what length of game you're looking for.
Yeah.
Um,
So for example, I would play City of Traders in CEDH, but I would never,
sure,
ever, ever put that in any regular EDH deck because I would just expect the game to go too long.
yeah. But I mean, CEDH also does things like plays Tarnished Citadel, right? Like the City of Brass that taps and does 3 damage to you because they're like, look, I'm just desperate for an untapped land that taps for any color. I will
Look,
play this
sometimes you have
thing.
to do shameful things for your mana fixing.
You know, it's like whatever it takes to get the colors you need to play the dockside, I guess. Um, dockside does dockside do anything in Legacy?
Not in the legacy. It's not consistent that your opponents have artifact mana, whereas
Right,
in like CEDH, every single
obviously.
opponent is going to play every mana rock that they can.
Well, in CEDH, dockside is the first card you put into your deck, no matter what your deck is. It's just like, oh, what are you playing? Well, dockside and X. Um, that's a part of the reason that I really hate partner because partner makes it so that every card can just be good stuff, and it's
Yeah,
like
a
that's
lot of the
really annoying.
top of CEDH is dominated by partner decks, especially Timna Crom. You just get so much card draw in the command zone and so much flexibility.
Yeah, Timna Crom, or before that was Thrasios and Timna, or
Yep.
Dargo and whoever, Dargo and Timna probably, or I don't know. Timna is like It used to be that Thrasios was a problem, but it turned out Timna is actually just the problem. Like Timna is just like, hey, draw a grip of infinite cards and then get two of the best colors to just be in your deck, whatever else you want to do. Um, it's stupid. I And of course there's no way to like you can't undo that. The cat is out of the bag. This is just the format now. Yeah. God, I don't want to think about that because I will get mad and then people yell at me. Um, so do you play a lot of Commander?
I play a whole lot. More casual than CEDH. Like I did attend a CEDH event this weekend, and I will
Mm,
attend another later this month. But most of the time, when I sign up for doing guest appearances, I love playing casual Commander. I started again. I played in undergrad and grad school, but I started again after about a 10-year break, maybe 2 years ago at this point. I wanted to just broaden my horizons, get in touch with a larger part of the Magic community, and honestly, just like meet some more people and socialize because we were coming out of COVID, and
sure.
I wanted to talk to some more people. And Commander has been great. I've
It's
loved it so much.
it's the perfect social format, right? Like there's no stakes on the table and you're just here to hang out for a couple hours. You get to know your players, the folks you're playing against. And if you're playing with the correct kind of pod, they're all going to be happy to talk to you. Sometimes you get in a pod where everybody's very stern faced and then you're like, okay, well, I guess. Who do you play?
So I have three active decks. I play Zonksha's Sleeper Agent, which is a Rakdos Politics deck.
Mm,
I have enjoyed that so much. Um, I'm gonna look up the name of a card. Don't want to mess this up. It has cards like Rite of the Raging Storm, where at the beginning of each player's upkeep, they get a 5/1 red elemental, like ball lightning with trample and haste that they have to sacrifice at their end step. So I use a lot of cards like that to get my opponents to deal damage to each other.
hmm.
And it's just been very fun, just like sitting back, just watching my opponents get to attack each other with cards like Slicer.
Oh God,
Um,
Slicer. Slicer is such a fun and silly card. Like, I was super excited to build it until I realized it was, like, top tier CDH level hyper strong, and I'm like, "Yeah, but it's also just a doofy little card that makes me happy." Um, it reminds me of, like, the best game of Commander I ever played, or, like, one of the most memorable decks I ever played. Somebody had a Narset, the old Narset, which is, like, when you attack, you draw the top 4 cards of your library and play, like, non-creature spell off it or something. Um, and they had a whole suite of spells which said you can't play anything on your turn, you can't cast any spells, you can't like all these kind of lockout things. And they put an assault suit on Narset, so it gets passed around like a hot potato around the table. And the only spells you can cast are whatever comes off of the top 4 that Narset gives you. And so you're swinging at everybody else, and you're just kind of locked into this weird hot potato game. And it's like, oh, this is crazy.
yeah.
EDH is delightful.
Then I also have Delina Wild Mage, which is essentially an
Yeah,
ETB trigger deck, which has
love
been
that
a lot
deck.
of fun. And my baby is Preston the Vanisher, which is a mono white blink deck with a large focus on the initiative creatures.
Blinking initiative creatures seems dirty. That seems like cheating.
Well, one of them was good enough to get banned in Legacy,
Yeah,
so now I can play it in Commander.
that was the jailer, right?
White Plume
No,
Adventurer is
White
the
Plume
three
Adventure. Oh
mana
god,
initiative card.
White Plume Adventure is such a stupid card. Like, I mean, I say that as somebody who loves this card, but the thing that gets me is that it's like, oh yeah, untap all the creatures you control. It's so messed up. That card is so messed up. What do you think about Initiative and Friends in Legacy?
I love it. I did a lot of work on pushing the initiative decks forward, and at the same time, they were not okay.
No.
It was too good. Like people tried to fight against it, and just a huge swath of the format was just completely invalidated. They just couldn't keep up with White Plume Adventurer. The main problem being that if you use the Swords to Plowshares or whatever on the White Plume Adventurer, your opponent still has the initiative. They can still just get a 4/1 skeleton for free a few turns later, and then another random creature out of their deck with some +1/+1 counters and hexproof.
Oh my god, the initiative. I love the initiative, but it's just broken. Um, I think I like dungeon delving better than the initiative because I think the dungeons there were a little bit more fair. The initiative dungeon is just a little busted. Um, but at the same time, I love those decks a lot. I think they're super silly and fun. Have you guys had any problems from cards from Unfinity with the new Acorn stuff, or the cards that are now legal from there? I guess
So
Saw in Half and
here's the
Comet.
thing. A lot of cards that exist in Magic the Gathering in paper don't actually exist on Magic the Gathering online.
There,
So, for example, Pair O Dice Lost is yes, go Scryfall that
what
one.
Parod? What the hell?
Yeah,
Uh,
it is a green card that allows you to rebuy your stuff from your graveyard that
Here, let me
would
read it.
see. Yeah.
It's 3 green for an instant. Roll two six-sided dice. Return any number of cards from with total mana. Return any number of cards with total mana value X or less from the graveyard to your hand, where X is the total of those results. Exile pair O dice lost. What? It's just a
So
mega regrowth.
yes, you can use this mega regrowth in your storm decks to do some very nasty
Oh,
things.
gross.
Like cast a Cabal ritual, get 5 mana, cast an Infernal Tutor, get something else, cast that thing, Paradise Lost, return a ritual, return a tutor, continue going off.
That's dumb.
Um, One of the biggest problems with Legacy as an online format is actually that a lot of the cards from the supplementary sets either don't make it to Magic Online or make it slowly. So,
Mm.
for example, Creative Technique will be coming out a few days after we record this episode on Magic Online, despite existing in paper for over a year. And some other cards like Saint Catherine is not available. Adrian Abdel is not available. Garson Starn is not available. The attractions are not available. And so the legacy
Which
format we see online doesn't
is very
quite
different than the paper one.
match the paper
Mm.
metagame.
Yeah, because I was just thinking like Comet is such a busted card.
Not
Like
available online, and I'm a little sad about it.
that card is so nutty. Like when I first ran into that stupid the the fact that this dice rolling dog thing, like dog planeswalker, is suddenly just like insanely broken. It just makes me laugh every time. But um man, I don't know. I love Legacy. I think it's really neat that the format's going through upheaval. Simultaneously, I'm really sad that it's going through upheaval because the nature of Eternal should be eternal. But also, my elves deck doesn't work anyways. So I'm just going to be grumpy about that until Wati decides to give me I don't even know what you could possibly do that could keep an elves deck. Something that lets me just flash in for free indestructible.
Okay, I'm going to tell you what they did, and you're not going to be happy about it. Okay.
Mm.
So the elf deck that exists in Legacy now has cut most of the elves so that Plague Engineer doesn't hose it anymore. And it's on more cards like Fiend Artisan, so that you sacrifice your mana dorks that you play out early and then turn them into lock pieces like Opposition Agent or turn them into
What the
planeswalkers
hell?
like Grist. So
What?
that's how the like Gaia's Cradle elf deck has evolved to keep up with the metagame.
That is dumb. I hate that.
So
I
they're
hate
off
everything about
like
that.
the Glimpse of Nature combo for the most part.
That that does not fill me with joy. But like, I do like me a good devoted druid combo once in a while, but um Watsy, why do you get to do this to me? Because like I can't play Elves and Commander. Elves and Commander is too linear and too boring, and I don't want to do that. I would rather play it in a 60 card format where the games are faster and where it's fine to play linear combo. We all expect it. In Commander, it's not the experience I want. That's also why I avoid things like slivers or like allies or whatever. It's like linear decks, they play the same way every time. And it's like I'm here for variety and like variance and chaos. And consistency is not my friend.
Yeah, I just despite being the tournament spike I am at heart, I build my commander decks without tutors for the most part. Like I want my games to be different. I want a puzzle to solve. I don't just want to assemble Thassa's Oracle every time in my casual commander pod. That's not fun to me. I will do that in my 60 card constructed formats with a smile.
Seriously. Okay, my friend, though, it was lovely to talk to you, and this was a really cool conversation. And I'm a big fan of your work because I do like just, I love like listening to educated people talk about things that they're very good at. And I find your content to be really just helpful to me to explore areas that I don't get to play, but I just really enjoy. Like now that SEG doesn't do legacy tournaments anymore, I have to find my fix somewhere else. So thank you for giving me someplace I can go look for legacy stuff.
Yeah,
Um,
thanks for having me on the show today. It's wonderful for anyone who wants to find my YouTube comments or hit me up on Twitter or whatever the site will be called by the time this podcast airs. You can find me under THRABEN everywhere. Don't hesitate to drop a line if you need anything.
Sweet. As always, you can find me at Gear Reporty Gears. You can find this podcast anywhere podcasts are sold, or at Cool Stuff Inc. on Tuesdays, or at YouTube on Tuesdays. Thank you to my editor, EK. And remember, my friends, it is not magic without the gathering, and we will see you next time.